This is a Nice Guys Patreon exclusive.
Welcome to another NHL team season preview video. 32 teams in 32 days. Ian Cameron, Alex B. Smith, and Dana Lane with you. And in this video, we will talk about the New Jersey Devils. And to say that the betting markets are red hot on this team coming into the season would be an understatement. I mean, we've got sports books, whether it's in Las Vegas or globally, FanDuel, DraftKings, Bet365, you name it, all the other books throughout the continent. I mean, we've got New Jersey top 2, top 3 Stanley Cup favorite this upcoming season to win the Stanley Cup. And I get it as far as the improvement that this team has made. But I think we're putting the cart a little bit before the horse here as far as where they are being priced right now in the Stanley Cup futures market. Is this a better team on paper this year entering the season than last year? Absolutely. Okay, there's no one going to deny that. But there are still some question marks with this team. I think when you look at them offensively, this was the strength. Last season for the New Jersey Devils, really scoring goals wasn't really much of a problem. They were 12th in the league as far as goals for per game. When you look at the power play for the Devils, probably could have been better than you would have expected, but it wasn't terrible. It was middle of the pack. The issue last year for the New Jersey Devils was the defensive side of the puck, clearly. Whether it was Vitek Vanacek, whether it was Akira Schmid, Nico Dawes, you cycle through every goaltender that played for them. Aside from maybe once they got Jake Allen later in the year when he played pretty well at times, they just didn't get reliable goaltending night in and night out. They had a lot of below-average defenders, guys that weren't blocking shots, guys that weren't being as physical and doing the little things defensively, winning puck battles in the zone. Really a bunch of issues there as far as that's concerned. Big reason for their defensive play being such a problem area last year for the New Jersey Devils. Defensively, I'm telling you what, only 5 teams in the NHL last year gave up more goals per game than New Jersey. You know who those 5 teams were? Ottawa, Chicago, Anaheim, Columbus, San Jose. It's not a group you want to be with. And New Jersey was only better than those teams as far as goals against per game last season. So clearly defense was an issue. Front office and Tom Fitzgerald clearly recognized that. So they bring in Sheldon Keefe as head coach. This is a guy that's had all the regular season success you could ask for in those seasons with the Toronto Maple Leafs. 82-game seasons, 3 of them he coached with the Toronto Maple Leafs. They were a 100-point team every single year. So we don't doubt the regular season success that Sheldon Keefe had there. It's whether it can translate to the playoffs. Now it's the question of, is this a Sheldon Keefe issue, or is this just a Toronto Maple Leafs cursed since 1967 issue as far as lack of playoff success and only winning 1 first-round series in the last 20 years. So that's the question mark. Was Sheldon a prisoner of Toronto Maple Leaf ineptitude, or is this an issue that in Toronto might carry over with Sheldon as well to New Jersey, the lack of playoff success? But they brought him in. You got to get to the playoffs first, and this is a team that obviously didn't come close to making the playoffs last year. It's why they made the coaching change. Lindy Ruff out, Sheldon Keefe in. And now they expect to make the playoffs. And I think Sheldon Keefe can deliver a team that at least gets them back to the postseason. I mean, up front, assuming health is there, I mean, it's as good a forward group as many teams can ice in the NHL when you're talking Nico Hischier, the captain, centering the top line, Jesper Bratt, the offense he brings, Andre Palat, veteran Stanley Cup experience and winner from Tampa Bay. I'll be honest. I thought Timo Meier early in his New Jersey run was terrible considering what they gave up to get him and what he's getting paid. But I thought he got more comfortable as the season went along last year. We'll see if he can make it a good, strong, complete season this year. Jack Hughes goes without saying how great a player he is offensively. And this is the guy that I have bet a ton of player props, a shit ton of player props with value. Goal props, you know who I'm talking about, Alex. I see you nodding the head already. It's my friend from Newfoundland, Dawson Mercer. This guy, I really like the game. I like that he's willing to mix it up, go to the tough areas sometimes to score goals. Yes, he's got good shot, good release, has a good amount of skill, but he'll also get his nose dirty and try to score goals for this team. So I like Dawson Mercer's game. Really like that player for sure. Eric Howla, Thomas Tatar, the veteran. We'll see what he's got left in the tank. Paul Cotter comes over from the Vegas Golden Knights as well. The one that I really like addition they made up front, it's Stefan Nason. It's a guy that has been a very good power play guy in the last couple of years, specifically with Carolina. You bring him now to New Jersey. And the one thing about New Jersey is for as offensively potent as they were last year, the power play was hit and miss. That wasn't a, phenomenal, consistent power play as far as producing night in and night out. Stefan Nason will make it, and you can rest assured Sheldon Keefe will put him out there on the power play. Big body in front of the net. That's been one of the strengths of his game the last couple of years. So I like the addition of Stefan Nason there. Another a player that can give you some offensive punch up front. The blue line was obviously the problem area last year. Dougie Hamilton was hurt. That was a problem. He was out most of the season. But the good news is he's healthy to begin. He'll be ready for training camp. He'll be healthy. You have Jonas Siegenthaler, who will probably be his partner, I should say, on the top pair. Luke Hughes, again, good skater, does a lot of good offensive things. Had some rough times defensively. He's got to continue to work at that, Luke Hughes. Obviously, his defensive game, but you would think another year, and Sheldon Keefe can work with him with that. And obviously, you're going to be better as far as goal prevention when you bring in a guy like Brett Pesce. It was a great ad from the Carolina Hurricanes. We talked about this in the Carolina team preview, that without Brett Pesce, that's a worse defensive blue line for the Carolina Hurricanes. And obviously, with Brett Pesce now in New Jersey, they're going to be better in their own end because of his presence. A little sandpaper physicality, veteran experience brought in on the blue line too, with the addition of Brendan Dillon, from the Winnipeg Jets. I don't mind that move whatsoever. I think we saw a lot of potential and to be a good, steady, play a decent amount of minutes type of defenseman from Simon Nemec last year for the New Jersey Devils. Keep taking that next step as well, and we'll have to see if he can. So there's no doubt. You look at that 1 through 6 that I just mentioned: Siegenthaler, Hamilton, Hughes, Pesce, Dillon, Nemec. Better 1 through 6 than it was last year. There's no question, especially defensively. Goaltending, I think you have to say by default, guys, Jacob Markstrom's better than anything they had last year. There's no question. Yeah. But we are talking about a goalie that's older. He's had some injuries. He had a bad propensity to give up a goal early in a game far too often last year, and the Flames would be behind early because of it. So he's got to get that out of his system. I know there's a team that can outscore some of those deficits this year with what they've got, the firepower they've got, but you don't want to put him in that situation. But it's still better goaltending with Markstrom than anything they had last year. They've got now Jake Allen in the backup role where he can come in and give you, 15, 18 good games, I think, in a backup role, 20 maybe even this year. And I think they should give him at least 20, actually, because I think you want Jacob Markstrom playing closer to 55, 60 games this year than 80. So I think you're going to see Jake Allen get his share, his decent amount of time in net for them. It's a solid pairing, and I think Allen is actually a pretty above-average backup, I think you can say, in the NHL. So the goaltending just by default is better. It's going to depend upon how much Jacob Markstrom can stay healthy and get back to the kind of the level we saw at times from him in Calgary and at times from him in Vancouver, a few years ago. But no, clearly a better team. Think they make the playoffs, but I'm pumping the brakes on anything to do with Eastern Conference futures, Stanley Cup futures. To me, that's not value with the New Jersey Devils. The markets have got this team power rated certainly higher than this guy does heading into the new season. Alex, what do you think, New Jersey?
Yeah, I think this is an improved team, but it's definitely a wait-and-see team as far as looking at anything futures-wise in the market. Yeah, you mentioned with just kind of looking at the two additions of Brett Pesce and Stefan Nason, Carolina's loss is certainly New Jersey's gain. And that's huge when you're talking about two teams that have gone neck and neck against each other in that Metropolitan Division. I think that's the reason why we've seen New Jersey kind of bounce out as a little bit of a favorite or co-favorite here with the New York Rangers in the Metro because of the changes they made with Keefe, the changes they made with some just spot players, and like I said, no big time signings, but just filling in guys in the right spots and adding in pieces where they already have growing talent. The forwards were fine, the offense is fine. I think Sheldon Keefe now kind of takes over a better situation where he doesn't have so much pressure on him like he had Toronto, of course, but also the same similar kind of role of, all right, I have a good offense. I just need the defense to be better and the goaltending to step up more nights than not to have a really good team during the regular season. And now the question is, can you piece it all together once you get back into the postseason? And that's where things, I think, remain to be a little bit shaky. But having Jacob Markstrom in net's going to be huge. The whole goaltending situation for Jersey is better because you have a guy in Markstrom that, and like I said, I'm of the group that believes that having a 1A, 1B system is the way to go. And I think that's the future of goaltending. But to have a guy like Markstrom finally be in a spot for the first time in years where he's the number one goalie, they're expecting him to get 50 to 55 starts, and he can play 50 to 55 starts. I think he's the change of scenery is going to help him tremendously, and having a veteran like Jake Allen, who I think needed some time to be a true number two goalie at this point. He's not a 1B option anymore. Having these guys have defined roles, they're both 34 years of age, that's going to make things a lot smoother for Sheldon Keefe and company. You won't have to rely on alternating back and forth. You can go to Markstrom 3 out of 4 nights in a given week. You can even run him in back-to-back spots if need be in some important games down the stretch. So I think having that balance, I think New Jersey's in a better situation of being able to balance their goaltending a lot better than some other teams in the NHL heading into the season. So I think that's a big plus. I think this team will make the playoffs at some point, but I think they will go through some struggles up and down, especially keep in mind they also start the year with the first 2 games being played overseas, playing in Sweden. So that's always a bit of a transition as well. So I would wait before jumping in on anything futures-wise with New Jersey, but this will be a team I'll be looking at, more than likely betting on the second half of the season. I think they find their way getting into the postseason this year.
Dana, what do you think? New Jersey Devils.
I'm glad that you brought up one thing, Ian. I'm glad that you brought up the futures on this team because I looked, I don't know, probably in the middle of August, and I thought to myself, this has got to be wrong. There's no way. And I must have thought about it for about a half a day. How is this team 11-1 in some spots, 13-1 in other spots? And I'm thinking, do I really, in my gut, think they're on the level now with the Rangers? Are they on the level with the Carolina Hurricanes? And one theory came to mind is this being driven now by the East Coast, Northeast sports books that don't want to have liability on their East Coast teams? That's the only way that we all agree on this. We all agree. I don't think they're a wild card team. They were going to give a run for the top spot in the division. But I just think to myself, well, that's the only thing it could be, because there's no way I can think of this team. There's too many question marks. There's no way I can say, yes, they are one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. And that's the only thing. I remember when the Vegas Golden Knights were, having their incredible run. And believe me, I talked to sportsbook directors who are like, yeah, we're not making them anything less than like 8-1, or we're just not going to have that kind of liability. That's the only thing I can think of, because they're just not on that platform. Do you agree with that, Ian?
That's a great point about and I'll go one step further about it. Bet365, and we know they're open for business in New Jersey, a lot of eastern part of the United States, states they serve. Especially New Jersey is plus 900, only behind Edmonton in the Stanley Cup Futures Board. Yep.
Yeah. That price is driven. That is not about who they think is the best teams in the NFL or the NHL. They do not want liability on their New York teams, especially on the teams with higher odds, and that's where New Jersey is. So that's my explanation.
Yeah, and no, that's something we'll have to take into consideration from here on out with certain teams that have, are in certain states that have a lot of different books. That's something we'll have to keep in mind when the Blackhawks get better in 2 years. Being a big fan duel in the MGM state and DraftKings, those numbers will be shaded differently. The Rangers will be shaded differently. So that's something to really take in consideration. And like I said, that has to be the reason why New Jersey is as high. Being in the range of 12, 15-1 makes sense. But when you start talking 8, 9, single digits to win the Cup and win the East, that's definitely some protection.
And worse odds to win the Cup with New Jersey than a team, or worse odds for New Jersey to win the Cup than a team like Dallas. I mean, that's just remarkable to me.
Doesn't make sense at all. But as far as the team is concerned, I think one thing that we have to take into account, and I saw it here up close and personal with Ryan McGill now on the staff in New Jersey, and I know that they didn't play well defensively last year, and we always kind of think about defensive hockey being the defenseman. But we saw him and what he did with William Karlsson here, who is arguably top 5 defensive forward in the league. I mean, I don't even know if it's arguably, but they turned him into a plus 49 player. He was a plus 49 player at one point. Even turned Derek England into a plus player. Alex Tuck was a plus player, and I understand with Tuck, he would probably be a plus player just because of where he was offensively and where the team was. But Derek England at a plus, that's pretty good. I mean, he was buried as a third pairing, sometimes second pairing. But for him to have plus numbers, I think you have to give Ryan McGill a lot of credit. Now, last year, or even a guy like Nate Schmidt, who turned into a plus 19. I don't think Nate Schmidt's been the same player since he left Vegas. Brayden McNabb was a plus 26. So I think he deserves a lot of credit. I know last year they kind of took a step back defensively, but this year I think he's not going to have a guy like Luke Hughes is going to be out there trying to find his way. I think he's going to go to camp knowing his way. And I think that's just a little bit more seasoning that they need defensively. I think they have a little bit more grit defensively. I am very interested to see what the evolution is going to be with Brendan Dillon and Brett Pesce, who are both battling minor injuries going into camp. But I think defensively, if they can start relying, and I don't think they're going to start throwing out 7 defensemen on a nightly basis, because I don't know who else you're given. I don't know who you're given, 10 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes to. But if you could take some of that pressure off of Dougie Hamilton, who, as you pointed out, had injury issues last year.
Yeah.
I think the bottom 2 pairings in New Jersey is going to really affect them defensively and their ability to play much better than they did from a defensive standpoint. And then, you mentioned it earlier, Ian, about Markstrom. I think this is going to be, again, there's so many question marks, because the last time we saw him, this guy was 2 games over 500 in Calgary over the last couple of years. And yeah, great. He's going to have another change of scenery, and he's clearly the better goaltender. But as far as performance and as far as numbers are concerned, between Markstrom and Jake Allen, I mean, you couldn't get any more closer to 500. And, by the way, you got Michael Hutchinson that's going to be sitting down in Utica for the next year. But I think they're going to be better this year. I think they're going to be really good next year when maybe those odds are justified. They're 10-21 as an underdog. They have to be better in that category in order to jump up into the elite. The elite teams win as an underdog straight up, and they are far from being an elite team. In fact, Chicago and Minnesota were the only teams worse in return on investment as an underdog last year. They have to start beating teams like the Rangers and the Hurricanes and the Lightning. They were 0-10 against those teams last year, and they're 23-48 against those teams since 2018. So I don't think they're ready at all. And I'm glad I came to some sort of a conclusion as to why I thought those odds were where they were. But the fact of the matter is they don't deserve those, and I think that they have to show that they can play better against the better teams. And really, as you climb the ladder up into the elite, you have to, first beat the teams you're supposed to, and then win a couple games, win games that you're not supposed to as an underdog against the middle teams. And that's kind of where I think they are right now. But to take that leap and say they're one of the better teams in the NHL from an odds standpoint, I mean, I think it's ridiculous. And by the way, you might want to go out and sign Dawson Mercer, who is in a really good spot as far as getting his contract is concerned. I know, he's under control, and, they ultimately can say, well, it's us or nobody, or you can go to Europe and play. But getting Dawson Mercer under contract, I think, is extremely important for him as well, because, look, last year was not what he did 2 years ago. And I think if I was his agent, this would be the time I would start hammering New Jersey for a deal, because if he doesn't come through next year, or this upcoming year, he's going to lose a lot of money. So I think they're going to get that Dawson Mercer deal done, but that's still hanging over their heads as they head to camp.
Yep.
Yeah, and you touched on a point too that I was kind of wondering about with the additions of the coaching staff. And you mentioned Ryan McGill, so he's going to be controlling the defensive portion of this team. That means you've got Sheldon Keefe working with Jeremy Colliton to run things on the offense. And I know quite a bit about watching Jeremy Colliton when he was coaching with the Chicago Blackhawks. That offense took a drastic turn with Taves and Kane at the end of their twilights as well, with Colliton running things. The power play was as bad as it could ever was throughout that 2010
You thought it was bad with Coach Q, yeah.
It was awful with Coach Q and Mike Kitchen, but it got even worse once Colton took over. So that's another point to look at too. As great as of the talent they have up front with the front six and on the man advantage at times last year, and you'd think things would open up with Keith overall, but if Colton is the guy running things on the power play, the man advantage may not be as great as it once was, like even a couple of years ago for New Jersey.
Yeah. Yeah, and you also made a point too, Alex, about them going to Prague. And I don't want to overlook this. And I know the quality of teams that they've set over the year before aren't, the best. I think Buffalo's been there twice recently. But of the 8 teams that they have sent, 8 different teams they've sent over there to start the season, only 2 of them have made the postseason. And I do think there's a little bit to that. Professional athletes, have been around them a lot. I know they are creatures of habit, and they don't like to do too many different things. And this is something that's way different. I remember, going to another sport. I remember when the Los Angeles Dodgers went to Australia, and Clayton Kershaw pitched the first game. He was never the same the rest of the year.
Yep.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's an interesting start to the year for New Jersey, obviously over in Czechia, as it's now called, to begin the season there with that trip in October to begin the 2024-2025 NHL season. I actually think this might be scary, but New Jersey, look, offensively they're loaded, but is it all going to come together? And I think defensively, and if Markstrom plays well, they could be better. Could they play some unders this year in their games? We'll have to wait and see on that. Because the thing is, when you think of Toronto and Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner and Nylander all these years when Sheldon Keefe coached there, you'd think maybe they got to be one of these biggest over teams in the NHL. Well, not really Toronto. Toronto actually did play a lot of unders the last couple of years. Because Sheldon Keefe was able to instill. And the one thing he always was in Toronto, Sheldon, is he was just hammering to his players, hammering home. We've got to play both sides of the puck. We've got to play a 200-foot game. We've got to be committed to it, night in and night out. And he really made sure his players got that message. And I'm sure he's going to be working with New Jersey in that same vein, knowing, of course, he's taking over a team that was, bottom 5 or 6 as far as defense last year and goals allowed per game. And just for some levity, before we wrap up this video on the New Jersey Devils, you want to see what a run of 5 seasons coaching the Toronto Maple Leafs does to a man? Here we go. This is Sheldon Keefe. The last year he coached the Toronto Marlies. This was from his last season coaching the Toronto Marlies before he got the Leaf job, which of course happened when they fired Mike Babcock. And that's when Sheldon Keefe took over in late 2018. There he is, very young, very, his best life ahead of him still, and obviously looking pretty youthful in that picture. Well, here is Sheldon Keefe then just a few months ago in his goodbye address to the Toronto Maple Leafs after they made the decision to fire him and then eventually bring on board Craig Berube. Here's Sheldon Keefe after, look at that. Look at the gray. Look at what the Toronto Maple Leafs does to a man in coaching that damn franchise that hasn't won shit in 57 years and counting. Look at the grays compared to what we just saw.
I also would like to point out, Ian, how many children does he have? Because that also, the older they get, the more that plays a part. So I hear you in Toronto. I just want to know what the kids' situation is.
Fair point. I'm willing to bank that a lot more of the reason for the increase of gray and need for Grecian formula for Sheldon Keefe is the fact that he's coaching that franchise and the stress and the day-to-day grind that it is in that market. But I just thought that was very funny. Look at the difference in Sheldon Keefe, pre-Toronto Maple Leafs, post-Toronto Maple Leafs in the hair department.
I do think, but I do think that will be a big change for him, though. Jokes aside, that the media pressure and it won't be just completely ignored in New Jersey. Obviously, being in the New York, New Jersey area, still that's a heavy sports fan area that there's going to be pressure, but it won't be the same kind of media scrutiny it was in Toronto. So I'm sure that's just going to make things a lot easier for him as a coach than say the last several seasons.
Great stuff. Alex B. Smith and Dana Lane. I'm Ian Cameron. This has been the New Jersey Devils team season preview video as 32 teams in 32 days to get you ready for the NHL season rolls along right here on the Ice Guys.